Well, welcome back, everybody, to Hey,
Hey,
what's your
what's your
problem?
problem?
So we've got Dylan and Mike here with us today, and we've got two good questions. And actually, Dylan is with us because he had a really good head scratcher that we're going to talk about. But before we do that, let's talk about Matt from our live chat here.
Yeah, Matt Mango. This was quite a thing. It kind of reminded me of shop class back in the day going through this
Yeah.
one.
Well, so how did this start out? He reached out with what was his initial
Uh,
problem?
well, he came out because he couldn't find anything about what was going on. He was having boost cut issues, hitting like 11 psi when it used to run at like 18 to 20.
Okay.
Just lack of power. And he was just sitting there like, well, what's going on? Checked vacuum leaks. I was like, hey, why don't we hashtag smoke the tank? Check it out with smoke test.
Yep.
What other things could be going on? It's like, I don't know. Let's find out. Are there check engine lights and things like
Right.
that?
No check engine lights?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
I don't think there was at first.
So this is a if there's a theme for this episode, a problem that you have to diagnose, but no check engine light to kind of give you that initial direction of what to look into.
Mm-hmm.
So let's maybe start there. What was your advice to him? Lower boost and just generally down in power. I mean, what are kind of the first things you look at?
Well, I was thinking, something simple, dirty air filter. Maybe we need to do basic maintenance, spark plugs, maybe coil packs. But again, without a check engine light, it's like, well, it's not really a miss like that. Dirty fuel, thinking maybe fuel injectors could be a thing.
Yep.
Just kind of the routine.
And at 10 psi, if it's like a really low pressure, I actually had an issue once where I actually had a loose hose clamp. Now the low boost pressure and down on power was also accompanied by kind of like a sound like when you're letting the air out of a balloon. So I knew that there was probably something that was loose, but it was basically what was happening is once the hose clamp just wasn't present in the squeeze of the hose on the fitting was past its breaking point, then it was just air was sneaking out, and so like it wouldn't hit anything. I think I was at 7 pounds or something like that. But it sounds like maybe in this case not
Yeah.
as obvious as a thing as that.
Not so much. And we got some more detail from him. He had a new bottom end put in it.
Okay.
So he had it kind of refreshed and was wondering, I was like, well, what could have gone wrong? Was there maybe something that was too loose? Did we have an issue where we were not seated right, or was there something else going on?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well, and what year and model of car are we talking about here?
The 03 WRX, I believe.
Yeah.
From the chat.
Yeah, and it was the stock turbo too. Looking at the notes here, so
Stock head, stock turbo, stage 2 tune. It looks like so nothing too out of the ordinary,
right?
Pretty run of the mill.
This should just be a classic, like, oh well, it's this because this.
Yeah, but there was not an obvious solution or
Right.
problem. So did he do some of this testing and come back and what did he find?
He actually did some diving down. It had been a little while since I'd heard from him.
Okay.
So I was like, well, we must have gotten it sorted, But just recently, he reached back out.
Yeah.
And he said 3 very, very classic words, followed by a fourth that you're like, uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Okay.
I feel stupid. But I was like, all right, well, we got some resolution here. It turns out the engine, like the car sat without an engine in it for 6 months in a field, like in a dirt lot.
Uh-oh. Okay.
And so he's like, well, maybe something got in there, hanging out because delicious engine wiring and things, safety from other predators.
Sure.
And turns out there was, in fact, a dead mouse in the MAF housing.
Oh, man. Okay.
But he checked the spark, he checked the gap, he checked the making proving, proof of concept on. Well, we have air.
Yep.
Kind of through the mouse. But we have spark.
Right.
And we have fuel. It's like, well, what's going on? And it was a classic case of find the tennis ball or find the red rag.
So we'll throw up an image of the former mouse, I guess, like a trigger warning or whatever. Like there's a former mouse in this picture.
Yes.
So you can see basically how there was just this obstruction in the airflow, but it was an obstruction in a place where it was not triggering a check engine light or fault code, but it was having an obvious impact on performance. And honestly, quite lucky that that's where it ended, because if it would have gone like it could have actually caused some pretty significant damage if it would have, say, gotten into the turbo.
The fact that it got caught on the MAF was really lucky, and yeah, apparently those intake pipes, they look a lot like little caves. A
Sure.
great spot for a nest.
Yeah.
Right.
When the car's
Yeah.
not running.
Yeah.
Yes. But so what this then spawned is a little conversation with you, like when you were in mechanics school.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game called Find the Tennis Ball.
Right. And our instructor would go before class and tear into one of the cars and hide either a tennis ball or a red rag somewhere. And it was our job to find the tennis ball. And if we did it within, I think it was like 5 minutes, we had the day off from class. So, we're really young, motivated guys, like, we can do this. And I mean, once I think we found it. Because he'd like take off heads and take off intake manifolds and like hide things. And then here's the issue, funny sound when, crank, 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 crank. Well, what's going on there?
Yeah.
So this is just like that, this is the tennis ball found. It just happens to be our little friend.
And this, I mean, depending on where you live, this might be kind of a crazy thing, but like we're in Boulder, in Colorado, like just in front of the foothills here. There's a lot of people that have cars and live up in the foothills in this area. And I remember when we were based at the dealership, we would probably see 3 or 4 cars a year. Like usually right around this time where it's kind of like the beginning of winter where it starts to really get cold. And they would come in with the car that's, hey, way down on power, don't know what it is. And the most common thing is it was like a squirrel or a mouse that is like squirreling away food in the airbox.
Yeah, I've heard of people with like dog food in the airbox, all kinds of stuff, and seen my fair share for sure. Basically, I think what it comes down to is this instance is one where it really reminds us that you should always check even the most basic things before you start diagnosing some of the more difficult problems to fix. I mean, just check off those boxes. Take a look at all of the most simple things that might be causing your problem.
Yeah,
because
look
just
at your
looking in an air filter, looking in your MAF, and boom, there was his problem, right?
Yeah. Shine a flashlight, take the airbox off, or take the intake off, shine a flashlight down there. Is it clear, unobstructed? Is there something in there or not? It's one of those like, eliminate all the simplest possible causes of the problem first and then proceed from there.
But how wild to like, wow, man, I've just got this rebuild. Everything should be great. And then you're like, oh.
Well, and it's one of those, again, the hard thing, and this is the theme of the episode, is a performance issue, but no check engine light. You don't have a guide of where to look, so you have to kind of think about the way that the engine works, the way that the air gets in, the way that the fuel gets in, spark, what could be causing this issue, and start kind of picking away pieces of what of those causes are trying to like confirm, like, yes, air is getting into the car, air is getting into the engine, the engine is getting spark, the engine is getting fuel, and then just kind of troubleshoot from there.
Yeah, it's hard because you think about like, what do you need for combustion, right? Fuel, air, spark.
Yep.
Well, we take for granted sometimes that air, being omnipresent, could be the one. It's like, oh, well, no spark. Okay. No fuel. All right, we can see those because we can control those. But air, well, it's everywhere. We have to have air. That's like implied almost.
Yeah. Well, good thing that he took the intake apart, and good thing that he found the problem. And and it's a good reminder. Good reminder to always check off the most simple possible causes of a problem before you get complicated.
For sure. Yeah, it was kind of similar with me. I started assuming some more complicated issues. I was thinking maybe my fuel injectors were stuck, and I mean, ended up being something simple too.
Well, all right. So let's start with what the symptom was. What was the initial in the car?
So I have a 2011 STI hatch. We'll go a little bit further back than even the start of the misfire issue, because I actually started diagnosing some stuff previously that was a little bit of an indicator of what was to come.
Okay.
So my first indication that something was wrong with the car was I pulled up after a decent drive. The car was hot. Everything was normal. All of a sudden I see a really, really rich idle as I'm pulling up to park. And that led me onto the thought process of basically like, maybe vacuum leak, boost leak, something of that nature. I don't know what's going on. Why is it running at 12 AFR sitting at idle. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So that led me into smoke testing my turbo inlet. I found some small boost leaks, like little stuff, but not really enough to cause any major issues. Then shortly after fixing up all of my intake stuff, smoke testing the car multiple times, was getting even worse issues with the car running really rich. I would go wide open throttle, start a pull, and all of a sudden, pop, 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 no misfires, but just backfiring out the exhaust. Car is running rich. It's hitting its target for fuel, but for some reason it's backfiring. It's not knocking, but it's just backfiring like crazy mid pulls.
Right.
And so, I'm thinking, all right, maybe back to smoke testing. Let's see, did I miss something? Did something else pop up?
And so this is after you had found a couple of small vacuum leaks and issues and corrected them and confirmed that those were fixed.
Yeah, so I fixed the vacuum leaks. I'm like, all right, everything should be good, driving the car as normal, and all of a sudden it seems like this issue is getting worse. It's breaking up now while I'm driving. And so from there, I brought the car into the shop, started diagnosing some stuff, looking at logs, and we have some of those.
And a key detail there too is you were getting this behavior, but no check engine light.
Yeah, exactly. No check engine light, nowhere to really indicate where to look. So we started making some logs of pulls where it's breaking up. The only things we really saw were like little differences in injector latency, a little bit of injector duty cycle difference, like some dips while it was breaking up, but nothing that was super obvious as to like why this was happening.
Right.
So that kind of led me down the thought process of maybe stuck injector, maybe something going on with fueling, my fuel pressure regulator having issues. I don't know. So start trying to diagnose some of the fueling stuff. I checked one of my spark plugs because in the process of this found like a little oil leak that I fixed, and the oil was leaking from my filler neck onto cylinder 2 spark plug.
So you had a coil pack and a little path of oil down the valve cover. That
Okay.
Well, let's explore this.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, maybe this is the coil pack that's having an issue. Maybe there's something wrong with the spark plug here. So I started inspecting cylinder 2, driver's side front, clean up the oil, get that leak fixed. And, put everything back together. Everything looks fine. The gap on the spark plug was fine. There's no real indicators that this is where the problem is. So I get everything back together. I decided, I'm going to throw some BG44K in the car. I'm thinking maybe it's a fueling issue. So maybe getting some fuel system cleaner in there will either show the problem more or help the problem.
Right.
And actually, right as I was driving home from putting the BG44 in the car and filling up, the car finally misfired. I went and I hit boost, and of course it finally shows that check engine light, kicks everything off, cruise is flashing at me, and I get home and pull the code, and it turns out it was a cylinder 1 misfire. So of course I'm looking on the other side of the motor. But slowly we worked our way in, and from there,
Give us a sense of how long, because, obviously we know, but how long was this problem going on? How many miles do you think you driven? How many days have you driven?
This was over the course of pretty much like the last week. So, driving into work every day, the car was throwing no codes, driving fine. But if I actually get into heavy boost scenarios, like getting onto the highway or something like that, that's when the problem would present itself.
So it was only at like wide open throttle?
Only at wide open throttle.
Okay.
And yeah, it was back and forth, through the smoke testing and into this for like almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. And finally, like I was saying, after 3 weeks of like, what the heck's going on? It's getting worse and worse. It presented itself in that cylinder 1 misfire code. And so finally I have something, it's pointing me somewhere. And lo and behold, I set aside a whole set of spark plugs. I was looking at all the coils, thinking about getting everything done. I pull out that cylinder 1 coil pack, and it's actually the mounting bracket for it is starting to delaminate, and it's getting some rust on it. There's a bunch of corrosion. So you guys can see it for sure. Like it's got a bunch of corrosion and delaminating, and we'll definitely make sure to show you guys in the video here. We'll get some close-up shots. But
it's what's interesting about this is that it's baffling that you didn't have a check engine light until like so many weeks had gone on with this problem. There's actually a guy, I think we had another question like this maybe on episode 2, where he had, breaking up under wide open throttle, but no codes. And I mean, looking at the spark system and these coil packs, it's wild that this ended up being it, but thankfully that misfire code pointed you to the direction. And we were talking about this morning because, like, these coil packs, it's basically a capacitor, but there's really no way to test the coil pack. There's no way to take this off the car and bench test it. At least not for us or for most of us.
For the average person, really the only way you can test it is moving the coil pack around, or if you have access to a brand new one, like I just so happen to be lucky enough to.
Well, and usually if you have a misfire on a cylinder and you can eliminate all of the obvious things, like if you flip the coil packs on that side, and then if the misfire follows the coil pack, well, okay, now I know that that's what was causing the problem, because the problem moved with the coil pack, and then you'd replace it.
Yeah, the way I was able to eliminate any other options was pulling the coil pack and the plug. When I pulled the plug, it looked totally fine. It was a 10,000 mile plug, had a little bit of black on it, but it was no real deformation, no discoloration.
No issues with
and the gap was right. We checked the gap. So, I mean, really the only possibility, considering it was just a cylinder 1 misfire, was this coil pack. And of course, you popped on a new one, and everything seems to be good to go so far. Done a few rips in it. I haven't seen anything weird. All the logs are back to the way they should be.
So and the initial thing that you saw, the AFRs at idle, have those gone back to what you expect?
Yeah, and that is normal again. There's nothing weird there. And I'm guessing that just comes down to the coil was missing some, even at idle sometimes.
So you have a lot more unburnt fuel that's coming out the exhaust and causing that rich reading.
Yeah. It's interesting. It was not rich enough to trigger any other CELs. I mean, because if you have an extreme rich condition, you can end up with some real common Subaru codes.
Yeah. Sure. What was funny was there wasn't any AF learning or correction either, like during these pulls where it was breaking up. The car was showing that everything was A-okay. It's it's sending signal to the coil is sparking, it's getting enough fuel, everything was appearing okay as far as the computer sensors were showing, but in reality that coil pack was just inconsistent or something was going on there.
And what you'd almost have to assume, because the way that most of these modern cars, and yours being 11 STI, it has a pretty advanced computer. Really, it has the ability to really know and be able to sense, like, what is the crank speed after cylinder 2 is supposed to fire. If it sees a slowdown, like, usually that's where it will attribute the misfire to a specific cylinder. Like, it can sense, like, I know that this spark event is supposed to be happening. I'm not seeing the normal behavior of the rotating assembly, and therefore that is where the misfire is. Like, that's how it can pick which cylinder and tell you which cylinder is having the misfire. And it's wild that you didn't get that for so long. It almost makes me wonder if the misfire was like maybe the coil was working 99 out of 100 times. It was just a very intermittent thing, but then it was something. It's interesting that the computer couldn't pick it up, but then at wide open throttle you had such a obvious error or obvious issue with the engine that you obviously, even not seeing the check engine light, immediately
I think being that my car has a really loud exhaust also helped that. Helped exacerbate that issue, right? So, like, someone with a stock exhaust who was at wide open throttle like I was, they may not have felt the same level of, like, obvious problem that I did. Because the car was bucking a little bit, like it would kind of slow down a little as it was backfiring. But really, if you stayed on the throttle, it would slow a little as it's accelerating and kind of jerk, but it was just backfiring in the exhaust. And that was the main symptom of the problem, was even more than like a misfire in the engine running improperly. It was just popping like crazy out the exhaust in the back.
Okay. And a little bit of a stutter in the acceleration, but just a little bit.
Yeah, and that could lead you to like, oh, it's a misfire, because you hear pop, pop, pop out the tail, and you're a little down on power. So it's kind of an interesting way. You got to do some sleuthing to really figure it out.
Yeah. And I mean, especially with the rich running condition at idle and stuff, like that would kind of point you down the path of fuel versus spark.
Yeah, that was my first thought, was, oh, well, with this weird rich idle condition and with no misfire codes, like spark should be fine, right?
Right.
But going the more simple route of checking coil packs and plugs first actually saved me a lot of legwork, because I was just getting started on the process of like, oh, hey, like all my Subaru friends, who's got 1050 injectors that are known to be good, so I can swap them in and test them and send mine off to get flow tested and cleaned.
Right.
Because I don't want to have the car down, but I also want to figure this problem out. And yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole that I'm glad I didn't have to go down.
Well, unfortunately, in this case, you finally got that check engine light to point you in the direction of where to look, and then lo and behold, there was your problem.
Yeah, that was the saving grace. There was continuing to monitor very closely and waiting for that check engine light to indicate, because I was going crazy for the last couple of weeks trying everything I could. I mean, I pulled other spark plugs, pulled other coil packs, checked all of the stuff that seemed like a possible issue, and just watching it closely and waiting slowly revealed that issue.
Right. Well, and I mean, obviously, we've got you at hand, so like, give it more days and whatnot. Everything looks positive thus far.
Yeah.
But if the problem manifests in any other ways or changes or whatever, we'll give you guys an update. But
posted.
It's definitely an interesting problem, and both of them really are kind of both the first and your problem is a reminder to start simple, start with the obvious things. And in your case, largely that's what you did.
Yeah. And I mean, if I had gone, one cylinder over across the motor and continued checking coils and plugs, that would have revealed my problem even sooner. If I hadn't got on the track of fueling and starting to try to chase all that down, it could have saved me a bit of time and potentially one or two nights wrenching on the car to just follow all of my possible leads on the most simple steps first.
To be said, though, I mean, that's looking at this coil and now knowing that it's bad, like looking at the corrosion around, basically the grounding strap of the coil and whatnot, okay, I could see where this could cause an issue. But if I wouldn't have known that this is a problem, or if you wouldn't have had that check engine light, it would have been a harder call to decide, like, okay, I should buy a new coil pack to replace this one.
Yeah, just looking at it, it's definitely marginal, right? The coil itself, like the housing, doesn't look bad. The mounting bracket is actually what looks bad.
Right.
And what's funny is the side that faces the front of the car, where it's getting the most spray from like road debris and stuff, is the side that has the most corrosion. So, another recommendation towards having some sort of underskirt for your car,
right,
and keeping all of the covers that you can set up might include, keeping some of these coil packs a little bit longer life, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, like, generally speaking, with Subaru coil packs, they either work or they don't. Subaru coil packs historically work very well, are very reliable, and last a long time. But this would be one of those, I guess maybe one of the takeaways from this would be, if you have this kind of problem where the car is breaking up under wide open throttle and you have no check engine lights, that maybe like finding a buddy that's got a known good set of coil packs to just swap the coil packs out and see if that helps might be a path. Or like in this case, it almost, what it kind of points to is that this coil pack was degrading. And that it probably degraded to the point where if it was working 99 out of 100 times, got to the point where it was working maybe 80 or even 70 times out of 100, and that's where all of a sudden the misfire code popped up.
And I'll say this, I did notice the delamination when I was putting everything back together, when I put the car together. I saw the bracket of the coil pack, had one layer or so that was starting to peel away.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's probably fine, put everything together, and it did run fine for about 10,000 miles. But if you ever see delamination on these coils, that's, I mean, for me at least,
and especially if you're having this problem.
That's my first thing I'm going to be checking is always look for that, mounting bracket delamination is possibly an indicator of a coil pack that's going bad.
And if nothing else, that would be a cue to reach out to somebody, see if you can find somebody that has a set of known good coil packs so you can just swap out, test, see if that helps with the problem, and if it does, well, I got to replace the coil.
Even just one known good coil pack, because ultimately I only had to swap one to fix the problem. So,
but you cheated because the computer told you which one.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. But that kind of corrosion and whatnot, like if you see that on like your front two coils and the rears are fine, maybe that's replace the front two coils and see if that helps.
Exactly.
Right.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we've got for this episode. Thanks very much for watching. And remember, with this series, we need your problems. That's what we use to come back and make the next episode. So if you've got a problem you want us to talk about or you need help with, put it in the comments below, put it in the comments on Instagram or Facebook, or reach out to us through our Discord channel, and we will keep compiling them together, and we'll come back and see you for the next episode of Hey, What's Your Problem? So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your support as always, and until next time, stay tuned with Flatirons Tuning.